Hello, welcome. Sorry, I'm just 5 minutes late here. Apologize for that. I just finished doing a live stream on the Brian Kohlberger case, so we just ran a little bit over with that. But let me go ahead and pop this open for Sebastian Rogers. I'm glad you guys are here. We are there. We have a lot to talk about. Um, oof. I have spent hours watching footage. It was to the point where I got a stomach ache and threw up this morning. Just so, so awful. So let me just get these all open. So I have to open up my packages. All right. And let me share. So come on in, tell me where you're from. And I am going to CYA myself. Okay, so I'm going to put that up. Um, Please allow me to CYA myself. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share, leave a comment. And everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Let's take a look.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
So if you haven't subscribing is free and it helps me out a lot. I can't get to 40,000 subscribers without your help. So today we're talking about the Sebastian Rogers case. And hang on one second. I caught something really important when I was watching the Duchess interview, one of the early interviews. I went through and I watched all of the early interviews with the Proudfoots. So we're going to be talking about I have a lot of stuff to go through. I caught some things. It was like to the point where I literally threw up. Uh I just feel kind of sick to my stomach. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to just deep dive into some of the early statements and put that together with information that we already know and see where we end up on this. But um, as you well know, Katie and Chris Proudfoot did not make any public appearances on any type of media platform that we are aware of prior to the first interview that they did on the Duchess channel on YouTube. They appeared, and they didn't actually even appear. They were behind the letter K. They were just behind an avatar of the letter K. So they didn't even appear on camera. So I thought that was, kind of interesting. And it made me wonder why normally when parents have a child go missing, they want to come out and speak and advocate for the return of their child. They want to motivate people to go search for their child, right? But in this case, they didn't do those things. And it's caused a lot of people to feel a certain kind of way about it. Now, the fact that they went on the Duchess channel, a lot of people have wondered, well, why didn't they go straight out to like a News Nation or someplace where they could get it out at least statewide in Tennessee, if not nationwide? Because remember, Katie and Chris have told us on Nancy Grace that he could be anywhere and everywhere. So if they really believe that, why not get on one of the national news and do an appeal that way? So I'm not really sure. It does make me wonder, like, out of the two parents, Katie or Chris, was somebody sitting around watching, YouTube videos in their spare time? Maybe they followed this Riley Strain case. We heard Chris Proudfoot talk about that. Maybe they followed the Summer Wells case. Um, which of the two parents would have watched videos like that? Like, how did they become aware of Duchess? I'm not really sure like how that all came about. She did do a great job. She interviewed them twice. So 25 minutes into the first interview, and let me just pull that one up I'm not going to play her interview. I've got all these interviews pulled up. but I'll just show you. This is the first one. Okay, so but I'm going to take it back here because if somebody just clicks in, they're not going to know what in the world I'm talking about. So we're talking about the Duchess interview. So about 25 minutes during that very first interview, which took place, a year ago, Chris Proudfoot said that Sebastian disappeared between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. on February 26th. Now, Chris Proudfoot was not at home, so I'm not sure why he was so certain that it was 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Is that because, this was the time that Katie was asleep? Meanwhile, we have Katie, who's sitting right there next to Chris, even though he does the majority of the talking during this interview. And, in my opinion, they were working together as a team. And, Chris did most of the talking. Now, Chris Proudfoot inexplicably refers to Sebastian as, quote, the young man. And so in this initial interview with Duchess, Sebastian is not Chris Proudfoot's son. He doesn't refer to him as son. He doesn't even refer to him as his stepson. He is referred to as the young man. So this is definitely noteworthy. I think it's odd, and I think it struck a lot of you guys as odd. And I think what I would like to do today is I'm going to talk about Chris Proudfoot a little bit, but I almost want to put him a little bit to the side. I really want to focus in also on Katie Proudfoot because I think I'm like trying to figure out I got to watch my words. I want to focus on Katie Proudfoot. I'm going to watch my words here. So we know from Nina Gomez already what kind of a man Chris Proudfoot was to her stepchildren. So we don't need to go into that anymore. We know from the multiple CPS cases that were open in New Mexico and Tennessee that Chris Proudfoot lied about, and that Katie Proudfoot also, when I showed you the Nancy Grace interview, she also lied about it. She said it was years ago. But Chris Proudfoot uses some really bizarre language during this interview. He says he's going to make everything crystal clear. And so that way there's transparency across the board. And this to me sounds like he really needs to convince the audience. And I don't know what was being said in the chat, but it just goes downhill for Chris Proudfoot from there because he says, me and the mom. That's how he refers to Katie. And this is why I think this is scripted. I think this is scripted, the young man and the mom, because when he talks about telling Katie to go to bed, he refers to Katie as babe and not as Katie and not as the mom. He refers to as babe, which sounds natural. So I think he did, tell her to go to bed. But the mom and the young man tells, to me, my opinion, I think it was scripted, and I'm wondering who wrote the script. We know who said the script. We know who delivered the script, but who wrote it? And so Chris Proudfoot also says that Katie needs to put the dogs up around midnight. So apparently the dogs were out. So I learned that. So the dogs, we've heard that the dogs sleep with Katie when Chris Proudfoot was not there. So I'm not clear on why that night of all nights the dogs were put away, but they were put away. And he told her, babe, you need to go to sleep. So the dogs apparently were out running around. So if the dog, and we've heard the dogs yapping in the background, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They just are little dogs. They yap, yap, yap. And we hear them in the background, like during interviews where you can hear them barking and excited so we know they do make noise. They're not quiet little dogs so I'm just curious why the dogs didn't sound any type of alert or alarm when Sebastian went out the door, if Sebastian even came out of his room. So I think if the dogs were loose, I think they would have alerted if Sebastian had gone out that front door while Katie was asleep and would have woken Katie up, in my opinion, allegedly. So then Chris Proudfoot says, we now have a worried mom who can't find her son in the house. Not my wife is worried, not Katie is worried, but a worried mom. Again, they weren't on camera. And I just really do feel like they had their notes and they were going through. That's what I feel like. They weren't on camera. And then we got the other weird interviews, one where we just get the hand massages where they're talking, but we don't, but at least, there we don't know they weren't looking at notes, but they wouldn't get on camera. So he talks, so again, no mention of Sebastian being his son, his stepson, nothing like that, not even saying his name. He's the young man and he's her son. He refers to Sebastian as her son. And again, it just doesn't feel natural. It feels like it's a script, in my opinion, allegedly. Then Chris says that Katie searched several times in the morning when she woke up, and now and then calls him. And she says that she went in to wake. And I'm just wondering if Sebastian had to disappear between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., which is the time frame that they're giving all of us on Duchess, because that was the time when Katie was asleep, right? Nobody can impugn anybody, Katie or anybody, if it's 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., because that's when Katie was asleep. But, she woke up at 6 a.m. to get him up for school, and he wasn't there. And at 6:20, she calls Chris Proudfoot. So in this time, she looked around the house, she looked around outside, got in the car and drove up to the school. And I've been assuming this whole time that Chris Proudfoot was controlling everything, and that I even wondered if Katie was like a victim of coercive control or something like that. But the more I've like gone back and listened to these interviews and watched, and this is just my opinion, and opinions are not facts, but I almost feel like that Katie's actually the one that's behind this, controlling the script. And Chris is just out there, in my opinion, digging himself a big old hole, but that's just me. So then Chris Proudfoot says the most bizarre thing. He said that, then I called the sheriff's office, and he says this, listen to this, because that's what you're supposed to do. Not, then I called the sheriff's office because I was so worried that Sebastian was missing. He doesn't say that. I called the sheriff's office because Katie was so upset. I knew something had to be terribly wrong. He doesn't say that either. No, he says, I called the sheriff's office because, quote, that's what you're supposed to do. So it's bizarre. And Katie's sitting right next to him. So this whole thing of we're listening to Chris, and I think this whole time I've been listening to his voice, and of course she's not on camera, but realizing that she sits right at his elbow while he's doing these interviews, because she chimed in during Duchess more times than she chimes in now, but I think she still sits at his elbow when he does these interviews. And I think that she's in this. She's 110% in this. I don't think it's coercive control or anything like that. That's why I want to look at Katie together. So he calls the sheriff's office because that's what he's supposed to do. And again, I don't hear any concern from Chris Proudfoot, and watching Katie in some of the other interviews, like on the Nancy Grace interview, she's cold. There's like nothing behind those eyes. It's just ice cold. Even when she, tries to act in initial interviews and sound distressed, she won't get on camera right away. So we don't know what she looks like, but I'm just wondering why she doesn't want to be on camera. And maybe there's a reason. What do you guys think? Are you watching closely? And then Chris goes into this long talk about what a big search this is and how the search has been extremely welcoming and loved, and many people are helping. And then he says, and it's a case to be studied for sure. And I wanted to listen to this in context because I thought, maybe somebody's just taking it out of context. But no, it almost sounds to me like he thinks this case is never going to be solved. And it comes across a little bit braggy. Like he thinks he's a great mastermind and he's outsmarted everyone. And then Duchess asks if Sebastian could ride the bus. And Chris says, nothing is off the table. And then he says, the young man again. And I don't know why he can't say Sebastian's name. Can't say now he talks about Sebastian, that he's his son, but not early on. Sebastian was very much the young man. And Katie just sits there silently. We don't hear anything from her for this part. I don't hear any appeals from Katie Proudfoot for her child. I sat through multiple interviews that Duchess did with them, two long interviews, and I didn't hear her, unless she was prompted to. I didn't even hear her, but she never said Sebastian, if you're out there, we're looking for you. We're going to find you. She never said, if you guys can please search, we're looking for him. You know, they weren't even on camera to hold up his picture, nothing. Duchess did everything. She showed his picture. You know, she did a really great job interviewing the Proudfoots. I just don't want to play her because I don't know how she is about so I think she's probably fine with it. I don't want to step on any toes. But it just, you know, Peter Hyatt said he listened to the you know, this early interview and thought it was about reputation building. And I agree. I think for but not maybe just for Chris Proudfoot. I'm wondering if it was some reputation building also for Katie Proudfoot. I feel like she's been sitting at his, you know, next to him for all of this after watching in the Nancy Grace video, completely complicit, allowing him to lie, not correcting him. And it's her son that was missing. And it is Katie who was in the house with him. It was Katie that gave him the best day ever. But I just wondered, of the two of them, which one was more likely to watch Summer Wells videos or Riley Strain videos? And then Chris Proudfoot, about 38 minutes in, starts describing his relationship with Seth and saying that there's no animosity between them and that they call and discuss whether or not Sebastian's been acting up. Acting up, those were his words. And I felt, I threw up after listening to this. You know, it was upsetting. I felt really heartbroken, wondering how horrible it would have been for Sebastian to have Chris Proudfoot get on the phone with my dad and discuss my acting up, which, you know, you know, according to Chris Proudfoot, this is what he and Seth talked about. And I'm not impugning Seth. This is Chris Proudfoot's, what he's, you know, basically bragging about being what, you know, what a good disciplinarian he is. But basically, Chris Proudfoot wasn't home at all during the month of February, right? According to him, he wasn't home for most of the month of February. So why was he talking to Seth? Well, I think he was talking to Seth because he was trying to get Seth to take Sebastian because Chris Proudfoot wanted him out of the house. And the more I've thought about it and the more I listen to these interviews, the more I'm convinced, you guys, that Katie wanted Sebastian gone also. It wasn't just Chris. Katie wanted him gone also. Even when you look at Katie at the Texas Roadhouse restaurant, she barely makes eye contact with him. She looks up from her phone a couple of times. She snaps a couple pictures of him. She's mostly into her phone. I'm just wondering how, and Sebastian looks uncomfortable. He doesn't look happy. Where's the smiling young man, the smiling kid, the smiling boy that we saw in all of these pictures? Where is he? Because he wasn't there the day of the Roadhouse restaurant. I saw a child that to me, he just looks sad. And I think we see pictures of that, you know, Katie's showing around of Sebastian, but they're all from years ago. And I think that's how she wants to remember him. So Chris Proudfoot basically wanted to rehome Sebastian, just like we saw the pictures of him and Katie pictured with two other puppies. Now maybe they were friends' dogs, I don't know. But those, neither one of those dogs are the dogs they had in when they were interviewed by the reporter. So I don't know. But it wasn't just Chris that wanted Sebastian to be gone, in my opinion. I think Katie wanted him out of the house too. And I think that night, after that, she really, really did want Sebastian to talk to Chris. But it was just heartbreaking to see how miserable he looks at the Texas Roadhouse, you guys. And then Duchess asks if Sebastian has any special interest, and she talks about her son and you know, that he elopes and goes to train tracks because he loves the trains. And the Duchess is lovely. She's absolutely lovely. And it's worth noting, you know, that they're on TV. This is their first interview, but they're not appealing for Sebastian to come back. They're not holding up his picture. Duchess is doing everything because they're behind, you know, the letter K, behind an avatar with the letter K on it. So it's just kind of odd. And Katie lets Chris do all the talking. And I think this is intentional on her part. I think it is. The more I've watched them, the more I think that Katie is smarter than Chris, although I think he thinks he's the smarter one. I think she is the smarter one of the two. He seems very unaware, and he tripped up so many times. And, maybe it's just because we already know who and what Chris is about, in my opinion. From what we heard from Nina Gomez, we already know, you know, what he's like, how he treated Sebastian from the CPS, from the fact that he lied about the CPS visits. He's just not a good guy, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. Um, but Chris, I just want to tell you, you're stuck with Katie now for the rest of your life because she has roped you into this. You are yoked to her forever. So I hope you're happy with the choice that you made for wife number 5. And Katie, you are probably stuck with him as well. And then about 38 minutes in, Chris Proudfoot shares that Sebastian's not a kid that likes to get dirty. And I was like, well, there we go. He elaborates, saying that Sebastian wouldn't enjoy swimming in a river, that he would prefer to swim in a pool. And it made me think the picture that we have of Sebastian that came out of him in the pool where he was sitting on a floating device, he's wearing shoes in the pool. So Sebastian wears shoes in the pool. He definitely did not go out the front door of his own volition, in my opinion, without shoes on. So either something happened or he didn't walk out that front door. So, or at least not of his own steam, or he wasn't planning to be out there for more than a minute. I don't know what happened. But in my opinion, this was not a planned runaway on Sebastian's part. No shoes, and we saw him in the pool without his shoes on. And remember what Peter Hyatt told us about the easiest forms of child abuse. He said it's neglect. Neglect. So we know that Seth believes that Katie gave Sebastian maybe too much medicine that night. That's something that he's theorized on. And I'm not saying that did or didn't happen. I just know that Sebastian had the best day ever. And we have statement analyst Peter Hyatt, statement analyst Steve Johnson, criminal profiler and statement analyst Pat Brown, all thinking, there's a 5-alarm fire with these early interviews. And then statement analyst Steve Johnson said he thinks something happened around the thud and that Katie was the only one at home with Sebastian at this time. I do want to check in with chat because I want to just tell Tara, thank you so much for being a channel member for 2 months. And thank you so much, Enjas, for gifting a reporter room membership. That is so nice of you. Thank you guys, both of you. I am going to check in with chat, but I just want to get through a couple more things because this was listening to Chris Proudfoot and Katie Proudfoot. I threw up. I really, it was really upsetting to hear what they said and also what they didn't say and just how they said it. So we don't have any other items that went missing with Sebastian. No shoes were taken. His cell phone was left behind. No coat or jacket was taken. All we know is he walked out with, no shoes, with black shirt, black pants, and black rimmed glasses. What do you guys think? Are you watching closely? So Katie wanted to talk to Chris on the phone that night, in my opinion, and not be interrupted by Sebastian. Maybe this is what Seth is thinking. I don't know. But they were actively trying to get rid of him. They wanted Seth to take him ASAP, and Chris Proudfoot had stopped coming home. And Katie Proudfoot had made her decision of what she wanted, in my opinion. And how many times have we seen women give up their children for a man? Susan Smith strapped her 2 toddlers in the back seat of her vehicle and watched it drive into a lake. Casey Anthony was found not guilty, but a lot of people believe that she did away with Kaylee. And then Chris goes on to say, the father. So again, this just feels very scripted. And maybe this is why they didn't want to appear on camera. The mother and myself have been extremely cooperative. We've been vetted. We have been checked out. We have been questioned thoroughly. These are all Chris Proudfoot's claims and everything of that nature, and literally have been cleared. There's no wrongdoing. There is no negative input from the parents or any of the family. Now, of course, the Sumner Wells Sheriff's Office has told us that no one has been cleared. So I went and looked to see, well, did TBI clear them? Maybe they cleared them, So I looked, and nope. I'm not going to read you everything that they had written, but I read through all of it, every word of it. There's no mention of Chris Proudfoot being cleared. There's no mention of anybody being cleared. Not Katie. Nobody has been cleared. And I just want to say, if you're just tuning in, this young man, Sebastian Rogers, disappeared from inside his own home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. He was 15 when he disappeared. He was reported missing on February 26th of 2024. And he needs to be found. So if you're just joining me and you don't know what in the world is she talking about, I am talking about this interview. I'm just not playing it because I don't know. I think she would probably be okay with it. I just wasn't sure, so I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. So there's no, and I went to the FBI site too. Let me see if I pulled that one up. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so I read through their site too. And there's no mention of anybody being cleared by any of the three law enforcement. So, why are they so anxious to tell us that they're cleared? Why not just say nobody's cleared? It's upsetting, you guys. It's upsetting. And it's like, it's heart sickening to think of the gaslighting that we're getting as adults. I threw up, and I'm an adult, and I'm not even in the same room with these two. I can't even imagine what it would have been like for Sebastian. But yeah, I've been vetted. That's what he claims. So there's that. We already knew Chris Proudfoot was a liar. We've known it for months. But who's sitting right next to him, not correcting any of this information and not advocating for her son? Katie is right there letting Chris do all the digging. She's right there. And I actually think of the two of them, she is the smarter one, even though I think Chris believes he's the smarter one. And then Chris talks about the ongoing custody case regarding Faith. And he says, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say this out loud. So he has to qualify it that he's going to be honest. So, I'm like wondering, does that mean that he's not being honest about all the other stuff? Because I already kind of felt that way, in my opinion. Or a lot of the stuff that he was telling us. But that's what he says. And we know the parents weren't cleared. So he gives himself away because now he's going to be honest. And then I can see why Peter Hyatt felt the way that he did about Chris Proudfoot. So here's what Chris Proudfoot talks about. He talks about the fact that there's a custody dispute going on in another state. It's been brought to light because people feel like they want to judge. It's not been brought to light because people feel like Chris Proudfoot is a liar. It's not being brought to light because people are concerned about how Chris Proudfoot treated Sebastian. No, according to Chris Proudfoot, this is only being brought to light because people feel like they want to judge. So I guess we're all too judgmental. So here we are, we're 48 minutes into this interview, and I've yet to hear Chris or Katie appeal for Sebastian's return. I didn't hear them appeal for Sebastian to come home. I'm waiting for them to say something about what this child might be going through. I don't hear that either. No empathy or thought about what Sebastian might be going through. Is he hungry? Is he scared? None of that. And we already knew Chris Proudfoot viewed his own life as being better without Sebastian in it, because let's face it, he gets rid of all the CPS calls, right? That all goes away with Sebastian's disappearance. So we kind of already knew it benefited. But let's put that to the side for a second and take a good long look at Katie Proudfoot, because she was sitting next to this guy, next to this man, while he used a belt on a special needs child with a chromosome deletion syndrome that caused him to have fluid on his brain. She did nothing, allegedly. Nothing that I've heard of. She stood by while CPS came to the door and didn't either said nothing or lied to CPS about Sebastian. She didn't defend him. And so how awful for Sebastian to be stuck in a house with these two. And if you look at Katie's eyes in the Nancy Grace interview, there's like, or in here where she, probably never knew this was going to show up. But you watch her in this, there's like no interaction. There's like nothing going on. It's really sad. So I think she got better at it when you watch her on Nancy Grace.
You go in your child's room where you find issues regarding if anything was missing.
Nothing. I mean, it's just this blank, dead stare. Just this blank, dead stare on the Nancy Grace interview. It's really sad. And that's how she looks the whole interview. Let's continue on together, shall we? So I think she's just as focused on building her reputation as Chris Proudfoot. She has never expressed, I shouldn't say she never has ever, because of course the interview that we saw of her most recently, she was saying and doing all the right things, but she would have had all the feedback from the statement analysts and plenty of time, to get ready. But at this point, while she's interviewing her initial interviews, there's no empathy for the fact that Sebastian might be lost, he might be cold, he might be hungry. None of that's talked about. She's just as focused, in my opinion, as building up her reputation and CYing her own butt, as and standing up for Chris Proudfoot much more than she was for Sebastian. And then we get to a question that I thought was really interesting, that they had this missing child, and that a news crew. We find out that they asked Chris Proudfoot about a news crew getting yelled at for allegedly being on their property. And Chris Proudfoot says, well, no, he didn't yell at the news crew, but they were filming at his house and he asked them to stop it. Okay, this is a week into it. This isn't a year later and you're trying to have some privacy and some downtime. This is a week into it. You would think that most people that had a missing child, if they had a news crew at their house, they would have run out to the cameras and advocated for their child. Instead, Chris Proudfoot's already running people off. Who ran off the United Cajun Navy? I still don't think it was YouTubers. So again, we have a missing child, and Chris Proudfoot has a media crew out in front. And not only do Chris and Katie not get on camera to appeal to the public to help find Sebastian, but instead they're irritated with them for filming in front of their house. Chris Proudfoot is the big mouth, but Katie Proudfoot, I think she's egging it on. I think she's right there at his elbow, right there at his side. And then Duchess starts asking about a billboard, and she's going to use her channel membership money to pay for this billboard. This is like the sweetest thing. And she says she could only keep it up for a few days because, billboards are expensive. And this is so generous for her. And Chris and Katie Proudfoot just sit there silently. They don't say thank you. She's putting all her super chats toward this billboard. They don't say thank you to the chat. They don't say thank you to Duchess. They don't say thank you to Trev Time. They don't offer to chip in any money of their own. Maybe they did privately later, but they don't say thank you. They're just, just quiet. We can't see them, so I have no idea what they were doing. Maybe reading over their notes for the next part. I have no idea. But they don't say thank you to Duchess. They live in a nice house. They have a nice lifestyle. Katie drove an Infiniti. Chris had a big truck. They had a big house. They had a big camper. Why, but they're letting Duchess pay for their billboard out of her super chats? Why does Duchess have to pay for everything? And they're not saying thank you. If she wants to, I think it's great. God bless her. She's lovely. But why aren't they being like showing some gratitude to her? I don't get it. And then Trev Time even tries to talk Trevor, not to be conflated with T-Rob. That's a different content creator. This is Trev Time. He talks about how important a billboard can be, and the profits still offer nothing, not one word. I think they maybe, I don't know if they were expecting them to offer to chip in or not. I don't know. I think at least they could have said thank you, but they sat there on the panel and said nothing. What do you guys think? Are you watching closely? So 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 38 seconds in, they finally say they miss Sebastian and want him home. And this is after Duchess puts up a flyer for Sebastian on the screen and asks them if there's anything they want to say. So they have to be prompted 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 38 seconds in to say anything about wanting Sebastian to come home. And then Duchess talks about the anonymous business owners who donated a $3,000 reward for the return of Sebastian. Again, not one word of thanks from Chris or Katie Proudfoot to these business owners. Not, oh my gosh, could we just take a moment to say thank you to everyone in the chat who's donated super chats toward the billboard. This is so kind of you. And thank you to the business owners for putting up a reward to find our son. Nothing. And, they don't offer a reward either. So then we go to interview number 2 with Duchess. And this time she has Arctic Fox and Crystal with her. And boy, I love this one was eye-opening. Let me say hello to chat. You guys, I apologize. I hope I haven't been. Thank you to Orange Wedge. The Orange Wedge says this case will be solved. I agree. I do think that something is going to come of this. I agree with you. I do. But man, it's just heartsick. Yeah, we're getting close. Sometime in the next few weeks. Oops, I just lost my comments. Okay. Yeah, it was just watching this. It was just absolutely sickening. And let me just play you a couple minutes of Katie because, oh my God, she's so cold. She's so cold.
Do you have a burglar alarm?
No, ma'am.
Do you have a Ring doorbell cam?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Have the two of you taken a polygraph?
I have.
I have not.
Would you be willing to?
I've offered and volunteered on many occasions to take a polygraph, and I was told directly by law enforcement because of my whereabouts, I did not need one.
That's laughable. Come on. Of course he needed to take a polygraph. Nancy's just going to give him the rope though. God bless her. She's great. But man, come on. He might, maybe he didn't have anything to do with Sebastian's disappearance. Law enforcement would still want to know if Katie had anything to do with it. They'd still want to rule him out. They'd still want to make sure that, they'd still want a polygraph. But he talks about the polygraph on Duchess also. But this is such a bold-faced bunch of malarkey.
Okay. Have the two of you taken a polygraph?
I have.
I have not.
Would you be willing to?
I've offered and volunteered on many occasions to take a polygraph, and I was told directly by law enforcement because of my whereabouts. I did not need one.
Okay, but that's not what he says on Duchess. So let me just, Nancy's sipping the tea. Let's get the tea, because that's not what he says on Duchess. Not at all. Not at all. So on Duchess, and Crystal is just like so great. Crystal is so great. She is like all over this polygraph. I'm just scrolling back to where I was. So she's got, Duchess interviews him on interview number 2, and she's got Arctic Fox and Crystal with her. And for the first part of it, the Proudfoots aren't there. And this is the second interview. It's been but when Chris Proudfoot comes on, Chris Proudfoot says it's been a rough 21 days and counting. So we know it's been about 3 weeks. So I'm going to assume this interview took like 2 weeks after the first one. Duchess brings up the billboards, and this time Chris Proudfoot does thank everybody. Duchess says she can keep them up for another week, but no mention from Chris or Katie Proudfoot that they can chip in to keep them up a little bit longer. Nothing. Duchess then asks everybody to walk. She asked them to walk everybody through the day leading up to Sebastian's disappearance. We get to hear Katie talk, and Katie talks about making, quote, a fun breakfast. And I shared this with you during the last live stream that she says, fun fact, I made breakfast. And the way that she says it, and the fact that she characterizes it as a fun fact, I think, means that she didn't normally make breakfast for Sebastian. So that day, on his best day ever, she makes him breakfast, and he gets spaghetti pancakes. And then she says, we FaceTime family so he can brag, because that's something he likes to do. And I'm like, so he can brag? Is he supposed to FaceTime family to brag to them that mom made him breakfast? I mean, what is he? I mean, I'm not clear on that. What was he supposed to be bragging about? Because we go from breakfast to they FaceTime family so he can brag. So I don't know what that was about. Maybe I misunderstood, but it just came across like he had to brag that his mom made him breakfast. I don't know what that's about. But then Katie said they went to pick up their niece. Then they met the mom of the niece at BJ's. They came home, they put their groceries away. A little bit later, they went to a bowling alley. They bowled, they played games. And then she talked about Sebastian as Bubba. So on this one, he's not the young man, he's Bubba. And she said they went to dinner and they came home. She said he took out the trash because it's his chore, and he was playing in his room. He played in his room until bedtime. And at bedtime, I told him, these are her words, to go to bed. And then he said, good night, Mom. I love you. But she doesn't ever say she said it back to him. And then he said good night to the puppies, and he went to bed. So no mention of a thud. No mention of her checking to see if he's okay from a thud. No mention that he responded to her at 10 p.m. None of this is in 3 weeks in, and she hasn't talked about the thud yet. Next, Duchess asks her to walk through what happened during the phone call with Chris Proudfoot. And Katie says that they do normally sit and talk every evening. So a long phone conversation is a normal thing for Chris and Katie Proudfoot. So we learned that. And I wondered, if Katie Proudfoot wanted Sebastian out of the way so she could be on the phone uninterrupted with Chris Proudfoot. And Seth has wondered if that he said that Katie gave Sebastian medicine to sleep, I think. Or maybe he was just wondering if she did. He would have had a very full stomach, right? He ate a colossal popcorn, and we saw him eating the salmon that Katie tells us he had at the roadhouse. So I don't know. Did the medicine make him a little bit drowsy and he threw up? Again, Peter Hyatt tells us, statement analyst, that one of the easiest ways to abuse children is through neglect and over medicating him. We have heard that Sebastian had trouble sleeping. Chris Proudfoot says she normally falls asleep on him, but this is weird. So he says she normally falls asleep on him and that he'll tell her to wake up and go to bed. But she doesn't say that that's what happened that night. Katie says it like that's just what normally happens. So it's not, I fell asleep and he told me to wake up. She just said she normally falls asleep on him and he'll tell her to wake up and go to bed. That's what she said, just tells us what normally happens. It was weird. And Katie says, this is what normally happens. So was that night abnormal? I just, what do you guys think? Are you watching closely? And then she says that she went to bed around midnight and that she put the puppies to bed. Now, we've always heard that the dog slept with her when Chris wasn't home. So why were they put up in their crates or kennels or whatever they slept in? Why were they put away, or put up is the word she used, that night of all nights? She said she went in to wake him up at 6 a.m. and he wasn't, and she couldn't find him. And then Duchess asks Katie about medication that Sebastian might take, you guys. And Chris Proudfoot interjects that for HIPAA reasons, they're not going to talk about Sebastian's medicine. Now, HIPAA doesn't apply to parents talking about their own kids' medicine. HIPAA's the Health Insurance Portability Act. It doesn't have anything to do with talking about your kids' medicines. So obviously they didn't want to talk about the medicines, but instead of just saying we don't want to talk about medicine, so it seems like that was a sensitive topic, and maybe that's what Seth was picking up on. So is the real reason they didn't want to answer that question about Sebastian's medicines and falsely claiming that HIPAA prevented them from discussing it. Why didn't they want to talk about it? Then Duchess asked them to walk her through how Sebastian got out of the house. I mean, Duchess is on it. She is like on it. She's got her questions. She's, the only thing she wasn't able to get, and she couldn't control this, is wouldn't get on camera. And Katie says she doesn't know about the windows, but she didn't think he went out the window. And she said Sebastian regularly went out the front door. And she says this, get this, you guys, and locked the door behind himself. So I thought that was really interesting. Sebastian regularly went out the front door and locked the door behind himself. So did she know he went out the front door? She said she was sitting in the living room. So how would she not know? I do want to say that Katie talked about Sebastian in the present tense. In the second interview, she was much more positive about Sebastian when she was describing him. And then Duchess asked Chris Proudfoot about a post that she saw, and that said that apparently Sebastian was scared of you. And Chris laughs. And Duchess continues. She said, he's scared of you and you're bullying him. And and you could just hear Chris. She's just asking him about it. She's not accusing him. And Chris is just laughing in the background. This is 1 hour and 39 minutes into the interview. And Katie says absolutely nothing. Her silence is deafening. And then Duchess asks Chris Proudfoot about the DV charges against him. And Chris says, you mentioned that Sebastian is afraid of me. That is a loaded question. He doesn't answer the question. He just tries to gaslight her. He tap dances around his relationship with Sebastian and parenting, and how Sebastian's going to understand when Sebastian grows up and has kids of his own, that what he told Sebastian was the right thing. I'm paraphrasing, but basically he's, bragging what a good parent he is, and that Sebastian will understand when he's older. But he never answers the DV question in that moment. Finally, he gets to the DV after he tap dances around. And he says that some people that are out there, so I guess that's us, went out there and decided to pull some public records. And Chris wants everyone to know that he's perfectly okay with this. And then Chris claims that if he had a DV in his background, he wouldn't have certain credentials he has because you're not illegally allowed to. Could somebody tell me, please, what credentials Chris Proudfoot has that he's not legally allowed to have if he has DV history in his background? Could somebody tell me what these certain credentials are? Because I don't know. I don't know what that's all about. And then Chris says, but DV, no, he denies it. I've had a temporary protective order. So this is interesting. So this is the case. It's different than the CPS cases. So now we're hearing about a protective order. And Chris continues. He said he had a no contact order. He said placed against me in New Mexico with my ex-wife. So I'm assuming that this is Nina Gomez. I don't know. He's been married a few times, but I know she's from New Mexico. I'm thinking that it's her. That's what I'm thinking when he's telling me this. And Chris Proudfoot talks about an event that took place where he's holding faith. So again, I think this is Nina Gomez, that he filed a protection order against his wife. So to me, it's starting to get confirmed that it's Nina Gomez. So I got to think, what was it like for Nina Gomez to hear this, rendition of what happened unfold on social media? Because she didn't have anything to do with Sebastian's disappearance. So this had to be uncomfortable for her. And maybe this is why she came forward to speak out. And Chris said, we went to the court. The court made their decisions. I gave my daughter back to her mother. She jumped in the truck and flew back to New Mexico. So this is about the time that Chris and his extended family took Faith away. This is the story he's telling, from Nina Gomez without a court order or judge's permission. He just decided because she slapped him, he was going to take Faith. And then he says he need that, but that, she ends up getting Faith back. But then he says that the need to go, that he filed the exact same thing against her. I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood that part. But what Chris Proudfoot says next is really interesting, because we're an hour and 44 minutes into this live stream, and he says that he has an ongoing case, the custody case in New Mexico, and he says which has absolutely zero bearing on this case with Sebastian. And just the fact that he said it had no bearing on this case with Sebastian, for me, I just took it that this has everything to do with Sebastian. That he was very worried about the CPS calls and Sebastian, in my opinion, allegedly. And then Chris Proudfoot says that the TBI put out a statement and that all three parents have been fully cooperative or continuously working with law enforcement. He's trying to align himself with Seth here. And there's absolutely nothing to show that there's anyone responsible. No foul play of that nature. And when he's asked about interrogations and polygraphs, Chris says all that stuff has been done. Except when he goes on Nancy Grace, he has to admit that it isn't true. Nancy Grace knew the answer to the question when she asked him. And he doesn't just say it one time. So he says all that stuff has been done when he's asked about the interrogation and the polygraphs. So Duchess asked some point blank questions. You guys have taken a polygraph? Now that's a simple yes or no. Chris sidesteps it and says the results are passed. The results are passed. He doesn't say whose results are passed. So then Crystal, I like Crystal. I like all of them. Crystal asks him about the altercation with Nina, and Chris says, and then we find out that he was having an affair with a coworker. So many people have speculated that this coworker was Katie, and Laura Lodge said that they wondered because Chris had said in interviews that they saw. I didn't see this one, so I'm taking this from Aiden at Laura Lodge, but that Chris had bragged that Sebastian had been in Sebastian's life for half of Sebastian's life. So to me, that sounds like, according to Laura Lodge, it goes back to 2017. So was this affair with Katie, or is this somebody else? And then Crystal asks him. Oh, then Chris throws Nina under the bus and backs over her, telling everybody that Nina slapped him while he was holding his daughter. Now, I don't advocate for anybody putting their hands on anyone, but he didn't call the police at that point. He waited till Nina left town and then basically took Faith away without a court order. I don't know what you call that. Child napping? I don't know. But he didn't have sole custody of Faith. But what's almost like sad, it would be sad. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad, but Chris tells us that he wouldn't expect any person to be in a situation of that. But we know Sebastian had to report Chris Proudfoot to his teachers for more than just slapping. He used a belt. He put his hands on Sebastian and he used a belt to do it. So it's very interesting, the double standard that Chris Proudfoot has for Nina, how Nina's, if this is even true, I don't know. But if Nina slapped him, he has one standard for Nina and a completely different standard for himself, in my opinion. And then Chris said he had to do what he had to do based on being a parent, what was best for my child. But the right thing would have been to go to court to call the police, if that really happened, and to go to court and to file to get custody. He didn't do any of those things. While Nina was out of town tending to one of her other children who was sick, they offered to watch Faith and then just refused to return her when Nina returned back into town. So I love Crystal for this because she point blank asked Chris for the results of the polygraph. She wants to know specifically if Chris Proudfoot passed. She said, did you, both of you, she wanted to know about Katie too, did both of you pass? Again, this is a simple yes or no question. Chris says yes, which is a lie. We know it's a lie because I just showed you the Nancy Grace interview. And he said, where he says that law enforcement said he didn't need to take a polygraph test, which is ridiculous. So what have we learned so far from the Duchess interview is that Chris is willing to lie and mislead us about a polygraph, and that Katie is willing to sit by silently and complicitly allow him to lie in her name as well, because she asked if they both took a polygraph. What do you guys think? Are you watching closely? And then you can see Chris starting to get mad. He's getting mad. We start to see the Chris that we see in later interviews. Nice Chris is gone. The mask is off. He's getting defensive because, of course, he knows he's lying. He knows he's lying, and he's got to know that law enforcement could see this interview. And he's asked point blank if he's seen Sebastian during the month of February, and Chris tap dances around this, and he says that he cannot give out specific details. He says, I wish I could. I'm sure down the road it will be allowed to come out. Really? Who's telling Chris Proudfoot he can't give specific details about whether or not he saw Sebastian during the month of February? Because I don't think anybody's telling him that he's not allowed to tell us that. And Katie sits there silently, not a word from that woman. Yes, that's me distancing language, because these two made me sick to my stomach. But then he does elaborate, and he says that he did not see Sebastian for a lot of February. He doesn't say all. And that he actually got back to Nashville. And I believe it was later in the afternoon. That's what he tells, later in the afternoon. And I remember Katie Proudfoot saying she called Chris around 6:20 a.m. to report Sebastian was missing. They had a three-way call to the sheriff's office. And I just love Crystal because she asks him why the sheriff's office was called and not 911. And then Chris says, this is another just whopper. He says, our house is not designated for city limits. And he said that the dispatcher would have simply rerouted them to the correct law enforcement agency. Again, why not call 911? So what if they would have rerouted you? Again, Katie has Chris doing her dirty work, in my opinion, because Chris called law enforcement. Katie didn't have to. Chris thinks he's the smart one, but I think it's Katie. And then Crystal asks if they had camera footage inside their home, and Chris tells them that they can't divulge that at this time because of an ongoing investigation. You can't say whether you have a camera footage inside your house or not. I don't know, you guys. And then Arctic Farks asks if Sebastian had a key to the house. If he had a key, did he take it with him? And Chris also deflects, saying that that is part of the investigation that is ongoing and we cannot answer. They can't answer whether or not Sebastian had a key. And again, Katie's just sitting there silently while Chris Proudfoot continues to dig himself into a hole. But it gets even weirder because 1 hour and 56 minutes into it, Duchess is still trying to clarify that polygraph because the chat which maybe some of you guys were in that chat, they are not happy with Chris's answer. And she wants to know, again, did he take the polygraph and pass it? This is, again, a yes or no question. And Chris Proudfoot gives here the most weird answer. And that's saying a lot at this point. That's saying a lot. So Duchess asked him, I want to know, you took a polygraph because it got cut off by a different question and you feel like you did not answer. So I'm just asking one more time. So she is being gracious about this. She is being kind. She's saying it got cut off by a different question. She's just trying to give him grace here. And Chris Proudfoot says, I just specified that polygraphs have been taken and passed, but that actually is not what he said. He said that he passed the polygraph. These are yes or no questions. These aren't hard. You either took a polygraph or you didn't take a polygraph. You either passed your polygraph or you didn't pass the polygraph. He claimed that law enforcement told him he didn't need to take one and he hadn't taken one. On the Nancy Grace, just, and he finally gives just that, weird answer. He says, has the polygraph been taken? Has the polygraph been taken? And has it been passed? Yes. I didn't specify who or when, but what I can tell you, everything has been vetted completely. Polygraphs have come back passed. So that doesn't sound like Chris Proudfoot passed the polygraph, you guys, or didn't take it. He tells Nancy Grace he didn't take it. I don't even know what to think. Now they're back to saying they took it and they passed. You guys, I'm like, it's just absolutely sickening. So let's go back to this one, you guys. This is like, to me,
that this family is going through right now. But we know one thing is certain. They remain positive. They are holding on to hope that their son Sebastian will return home safely.
Can you walk us through what you're thinking right now?
I just want my baby to be okay. I don't know where he's at.
Mom Katie broke down several times in our interview, but says her hope is strong that her son Sebastian will be found safe and return home.
He's going to walk through that door and the street will be flooded again with family and relatives all waiting to hug and love him. And
Stepdad Chris says it's been an emotional roller coaster that all started Sunday night, February 25th.
Pretty normal. He was playing in his room. When I told him to go to bed, he did. He said, good night, Mom. I love you.
Katie says she went to wake up Sebastian around 6 a.m. Monday for school, and he was gone. Within minutes, Katie says she was on the phone with Chris, who was working out of town, and they quickly called 911.
And he's not a runner. He's never run away before. I don't know why. I don't know why he walked out that door.
So compare that with this one.
I understand. Ms. Proudfoot, did you pass your polygraph?
I did.
Those questions out of the way. Was Faith in the home when Sebastian went missing?
no, ma'am.
Does anyone else have a key to your home beside your immediate family?
No.
No, ma'am.
That night, Miss Proudfoot, at midnight when you went to bed, what did you do until midnight?
I had been reading a chapter that I needed to, and I had been talking to my husband on the phone. I was falling asleep on him, so that's when he told me it was around midnight. He told me to go ahead and put the dogs up and go to bed, and that's what I did. I got up, put the dogs where they sleep, and then I myself went to bed.
Where do they sleep?
They have a big pen.
A pen, is it inside or outside?
Inside.
Inside.
And we heard those dogs barking in another interview.
That reminds me of another question. Do you guys have a motion sensor light or lights on the outside of your house?
Yes, we do have lights on the outside of our house.
Did they activate that night?
They're not motion censored.
Look at Katie's face. There's just like, I'm sorry. It's just, I don't know, you guys. I feel so sorry for Sebastian. I really do. And then, you know, looking at this video of the two of them eating, and she's not even hardly interacting with him. He doesn't look happy here. He just doesn't look happy. He looks sad. I mean, it makes me feel really bad for him. Thank you so much, Njaz, for the 10 pounds. I really, really appreciate it. Today felt hard. And I listened to him yesterday too. I slept for 3 hours last night. I had bad dreams. It was just hearing the way that they talk. I feel so sorry for Sebastian. I really, really do, you guys. Thank you so much, Sassy. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it, Sassy T. Yeah, it just felt really hard. It just really felt hard, and just ick, just an ick factor. There's just, it's just listening to how lovely and sweet Duchess was and Trev Time was. And she's giving her super chats to them to put up a billboard. And she can only do it for a few days because a billboard costs like, I think it's like at least $1,000 a month for a billboard. It's not cheap. And might be more than that. But I think it's at least that. And, the fact that she's doing it for the time that she can do it, I mean, it's just, she's so sweet. And they're not even saying thank you. Her chats, donating super chats, and they're not even saying thank you. It's just, I don't think they really came on there because they cared about finding Sebastian, in my opinion. I think they went on there because there was like an outcry from the public to get out there. And they wanted to put their toe in the water without having to go on camera, just like we did on that weird hands interview where they wouldn't go on camera, but so we have a close-up of their hands and they're just massaging each other's hands. But I do wonder if that night, after the best day ever, if Katie really just did want to talk to Chris by herself without being interrupted by Sebastian, and if maybe Seth was right. Maybe Seth was right. What do you guys think? Are you watching closely? Thank you so much, Mike, for the super sticker. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah, Brother Mike says Chris Proudfoot's not a nice guy. No, he's very triggering to listen to for hours. You can watch it. I found it. Maybe it won't trigger you the same way. I found it to be very, very upsetting. Oh, is that okay? So let me play it. Which one? The one I know which one you're talking about. I think I closed that one out. But the one I had up of them, yeah, I think I closed that one out. I watched more of Trisha's too.
What did you say? She asked the question about a situation, and she asked me if I had ever had CPS called on me, I believe is what the question was. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't exactly know what the question was without hearing it again. So I'm not going to answer you.
Hear how his voice is getting? So he starts out really sweet and nice with Duchess, But after he got like asked a couple of hard, like pushed on the polygraph, that's when he started getting into this, his mask came off and we got to see,
with something without having it in front of you.
We didn't see him.
That's fair.
Because
That's
he hid
very
behind
fair.
an avatar the whole time.
Very fair. And so let's move on. Okay. So nothing came of that from you hitting him with a belt. Has there ever been any, and people are going to ask, has there ever been any violence in your home as far as Sebastian is concerned?
No.
Okay. Now, Gray asked, why is Seth being treated?
We know that's not true. We know that's not true.
It's so different because of how Chris came on and became so angry and did what you did tonight, Chris. You've done this before. And I think that's why. And Seth didn't. And I think that's the difference.
Right. Because I don't feed out of people's hands. I don't feed into what people think. I don't. And then once again, that's the difference.
But how about just saying thank you to the people that.
So Seth is feeding out of people's hands because he's not rude to people who are having him on. And Chris Proudfoot wasn't an invited guest on this show. This was an interview with PI Chloe. He horned in on somebody else's interview. He barged in, and Trisha graciously let him come up and have his say, and even had Gray Hughes on to make Chris feel, more comfortable. And he still couldn't be gracious to her.
That want to help you.
Okay, well, that's simple. There's a difference in me saying thank you to everyone, which if you go back and listen to every single interview I have done, I have told everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you have done. There's not enough thank you in this world. We can't begin to describe how much we appreciate it. I have said.
No, I listened to him on both of Duchess's interviews. No, I didn't hear him thanking her, and she was really good to them. She deserved to be thanked.
Said this.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to one video and show me where I haven't. I've also said that our family.
I'll do that, Chris. I'll direct you to Duchess. Interview 1 is clearly labeled interview 2. Watch those. Watch them both.
Praise for everybody else, and we love you all, regardless of what you think. But you know what? Once again.
Yeah. I think when his first interview, you got to admit, his first few interviews were really calm. The one on, can't remember the names of their channels, but he was on multiple channels, calmly talking. Both of them were. And yet the public was already angry with him before he became angry on a show because that was definitely.
Well, the public, I don't want to I like Gray, so I don't want to get into it with Gray, so I won't. We don't have to agree on every case. It's okay if we don't agree on everything. Gray drops off here, though.
Rather than go on the internet.
But Gray came on to make Chris Proudfoot feel more comfortable, which was very nice of him. I hope Chris Proudfoot told him thank you.
Just call me on the phone and I can put him on and to be a really, really strong signal. I mean, it'll sound really good.
So she's trying to get Seth to come up now.
I think it's just like his cell signal up there is not the greatest.
Oh, it's his cell. Okay.
Yeah.
But if he wants to,
I mean, if he's on his cell phone, let me.
Heather, if you want to give him my number, and Chloe has it, feel free. And if it's better for him to call me rather than to jump online.
I'm texting him.
Okay, we can do that. So, hey guys, I don't want to talk about other creators in chat, so let's not do that. Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I really like Gray Hughes. I think he did Trisha a favor. He came on to yeah, it's hard keeping those lies straight. Exactly. Thank you so much, Truth Seeker, for the $4.99. Truth 911. Sorry, Truth 911. My bad. I like your picture with the mask. That's very apropos. Thank you so much, Tara. Tara says, Googled the cost of 500 to, the cost of a billboard is 500 to 10,000 a month, depending on, is it 10,000 or 1,000 a month, depending on the size and location? I'm just like curious what that, if it's a 1,000, I guess it probably depends on where it's located too, right? So, but bless, Gray Hugh's heart. He comes on there. He's trying to help Trish out, man. He is trying. And he got dragged for doing that. And I don't think that was fair because he was helping out a friend. And he's a good guy. If you don't know him, he has a good channel. He runs it with integrity. He's a good person. Mike thinks that Sebastian was treated like a dog. Sassy T says, poor Sebastian had to live with this. Mummy says, if Sebastian had this chromosomal disorder, I wonder if he could have passed away easily if he was hit in the face or head. Yeah. It's such a good question. I did do a video on the marks. I enhanced those photos of the arms. And when I was first working with the photos, I was working with it on a smaller screen. And when I brought it over to the computer that I'm on right now and loaded them up, I was like, oh my gosh, you could really see there are clear marks on there. And I didn't try to say what they were, but I did do a video on it. I enhanced them and I was really shocked. Trevor Lee and Seth have history. There's I don't know what happened, and I don't want to like get into it because I can like both of them and not, I can like both and not I don't want to get involved. Whatever they have, it's none of my business. Whatever they went through, it's not none of my business. So I'm just gonna stay out of it. I can really like both content creators. I thought that it was T-Rev that had drama with Seth, but maybe I'm wrong. A lot of people get Trev time mixed up with T-Rev too. So I'm not saying that's what you're doing, Castle. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because I'm like, I don't know anything about that. And I don't want to know anything. Don't bring it into the chat. I do not want drama. I was already so upset after listening to these interviews. By the time I got done listening to Trisha's, and then I went through both of Duchess's, I had nightmares. I slept for like 3.5 hours last night. And when I got up this morning, I had to finish listening to interview number 2. And I I was so upset. I threw up. Chris Proudfoot, narcissist, and Katie Proudfoot, enabler. And Sebastian Rogers was the scapegoat. Yep. Lie 1023. So he says he doesn't sound like he appreciates it. No, I don't. Even with Trisha, he's saying he appreciated, he thanked everybody. But you can go listen to Duchess's interview. I didn't feel he was like saying thank you. I didn't get any of that. I didn't even hear them like on the first interview appealing to Sebastian. It was all about them, how it was affecting them. In my opinion, the second interview, they got better, but it still wasn't great. And you can hear him here. He's still not great. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room. That's why I do think this will get solved, you guys. Because I don't think he's as smart as he thinks he is. No, Chris Proudfoot, you did not thank everyone. More lies. Thank you, Dorothy. Allegedly, in Dorothy's and my opinion. Chris Proudfoot's getting enough thank yous. He's a nasty piece of work. And says, Top Cat says, it gives me anxiety to listen to Chris. Yeah, I get it, Top Cat. I totally get that. Tracy says, need to build a timeline of his lies. You know what? That's a great idea, Tracy. I have enough notes. Oh my gosh. What I gave to you tonight was I edited out probably 2/3 of what I wrote. I edited back out just so it wouldn't end up being, just like a 5-hour live stream. Because these lives are like 2 hours and 3 hours long each. So to watch the lives and then have commentary on top of that, it could have easily gone 5.5 or so hours. I don't know. But yeah, that's a great idea, Tracy. Stephanie says, I'm confused. Did they do a new interview? You said you couldn't sleep last night. Where do I look to see it? Oh, I was watching their first interview. This one. Let me show it to you. I just don't want to play it because I don't know this content. She has their first and their second interview on her channel. Her channel is called Duchess, and she does lots of missing kids, and she is lovely, absolutely lovely. I just don't have her face up on the screen because I just feel like somehow it's not fair to her. I just want to, and also anybody who's coming by is not going to know what I'm talking about, that I have her face up there instead of, you know, what I'm talking about today. Castle agrees with you, Orange Web. In my opinion, yeah. We're all saying in our opinion. And just as I listened to this again last night, yeah, he made me throw up. Absolutely. That was his last location. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Pepper. Thanks for modding today, you guys. Maria says, Chris Proudfoot attitude scares me. What Sebastian must have gone through with this evil mod, and Katie Proudfoot did nothing to protect Sebastian, her own son, in my opinion. Yeah, that's how I felt too. I think that's why it just like gave me nightmares, just listening to him. And I just thought, God, I'm not in the same house with him. I can turn my TV off. Sebastian, he couldn't turn them off. And Katie, you know, all this time I've been thinking, you know, that it was coercive control. It was this and that. When I caught her lying on Nancy Grace last week, saying that the CPS call was years ago, I realized, oh my God, she fooled me. She had me so fooled. But look at her, you guys. Ice.
We have lights.
Were they on that night?
No,
Okay.
ma'am.
Were they on that night? So the lights were out the whole night?
Yes, ma'am. We don't typically turn the floodlights on.
Were there any lights outside the house on at all?
Just
look at her eyes, you guys.
my little solar lights that we have in the garden.
There's two lights on the side of the house above the garage that are on at all times.
Oh, yeah, those are on.
Oh, there's a light above the garage. It's on at all times?
There's two. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So those lights were on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because I heard you say earlier, Mr. Proudfoot, that your neighbors have been very, very forthcoming with their Ring camera info. And I was trying to determine if any lights were on, what, if anything, they may have caught. But I understand from your previous interviews that nothing of any evidentiary value was caught. And also, in another statement you gave, I understand that the video of the two flashlights, and I'm saying that with air quotes, that's not exactly what that was at all. We now don't believe that two flashlights were observed around your home. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're very correct.
Okay. Question.
According to them, I'll just wait for law enforcement, but just nothing from this person. Nothing. So she's quiet. It's always the quiet ones. Emily says, I feel as if Chris Proudfoot just remained calm, he'd be more believable. He's such an angry man that he comes across more suspicious than not. Yeah, I think you're right, Emily. I mean, if he stayed with the mask on and just stayed polite, yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't give Chris my number for anything. Yeah, right? Magnetic said, I've never heard one heartfelt thank you from Chris Proudfoot. Thanks for that. Tara says, Google says $500 to $10,000 for a billboard. So 500 is the minimum. And here is sweet, kind, lovely Duchess offering to do this for them. And they live in a fancy house. They have a fancy camper. They're sitting in it right there on Nancy Grace. She drives an Infinity. Katie does. He has a truck, you know, that's big enough to pull this camper. So these, you know, they're not poor. Why is Duchess, and you know, if Duchess wanted to, I think that's great. Why aren't they offering to chip in? They didn't even offer $1. Maybe they did off the air and I don't know about it. That's possible. Eileen thinks they treated the dogs better. Thanks for that, Tara. He likes to run the show. Yeah, and she lets him. Who's the smarter one? But when I caught her saying that, for those of you that don't know what am I talking about? If you didn't see my last live stream, let me just play you this.
Thud.
A thud. You stated that you said, look, I don't care what you're doing in there. Go to bed. Is that right?
I was on the couch, which is near his room, and I said, Bubba, did you fall out of the bed? And he said, no, ma'am. And I said, well, whatever you're doing in there, knock it off and go to sleep.
So you heard his voice at 10 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
So in this version, he doesn't answer her, and she doesn't ask if he's okay.
Have any idea what the sound actually was?
I do not know.
If he were to go out his window, what would he step on?
Mulch and bushes.
Did you say mulch or mush?
Mulch.
Mulch.
Mulch. Okay. Got it. Has he ever gone out the window before?
No, ma'am.
Can we talk about Sebastian's shoes? Why are you convinced Sebastian left with mush?
Mulch.
Cams point toward your house. Could they pick that up?
They do, but
shoes. Why are you convinced Sebastian left without shoes on? Or are you?
Well, the reason that came about is because all of his shoes are accounted for inside the house still.
Are you positive?
I'm positive.
How do you know what clothes he was wearing?
The clothes that we described are the ones I saw him in when he went to bed.
That morning, you woke up at 6 o'clock. Is that the normal time you wake up?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you a heavy sleeper?
Off and on.
Do you take any medication at night that would make you sleep?
No, ma'am.
But you heard nothing?
I did not, no.
So we know he is alive and well at 10 p.m. At 6 a.m. He's gone. You say he's never left before. Is that right?
Correct. He's never run off before.
And could I confirm, where was his bio dad at the time he went missing?
I believe he was at work in Nashville.
Had there been any family argument or altercation prior to him going missing?
No, ma'am.
And Mr. Proudfoot, when did you leave town?
Early February.
So you were not home from the time you left early February till Feb 26. Is that right? RV Park. Okay. Following back up on that morning, you search the home, Ms. Proudfoot. Then you get in your vehicle and you start searching. Did Sebastian know how to drive?
Yes, ma'am.
So your car's in the same place. You get in the car, you start looking in the neighborhood for him. Is that right?
Without looking at a call log, I can't give you the exact time, but on or about 6:20.
And had you guys been talking on the phone before 6 a.m. or did you initially call Mr. Proudfoot at the time you realized Sebastian was gone?
I called him when I realized Sebastian was gone.
We're almost there to it, you guys.
Have you guys been out looking for Sebastian?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
We were given information that you guys have left the home. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
I'm going back to work.
You're going back to work. What about you, Miss Proudfoot?
And I'm not going back to work. Not yet, at least.
Did
you think that's what she was asking her? I think that was a dodge.
you leave the home also, Miss Proudfoot?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
To accompany my husband going back to work, and then I'm coming back.
So no mention of any threats. In fact, she's coming back. No threats in this interview.
Okay, when will you be back? Do you know yet?
But wait.
No, not yet.
Are you concerned about being away while the search is ongoing?
Absolutely, I am.
Then why are you going?
Because my son could be anywhere, and we're looking everywhere and anywhere.
I've got a question for you.
Yes,
I want
ma'am.
to find out about Mr. Proudfoot hitting Sebastian with a belt. What happened?
That was actually several years ago.
Right when she said that, that's my whole opinion on Katie changed right there. She immediately starts. That was years ago, several years ago. We know, and I showed you Chris Proudfoot on Smiley Story admitting that Sebastian was 15. And he was 15 when he disappeared.
Then why are you going?
So no mention of threats in this
Because
rendition.
my son could be anywhere, and we're looking everywhere and anywhere.
And no mention of Sebastian answering her in this rendition either. But
I've got a question for you.
Yes,
I want
ma'am.
to find
Katie
out
lies
about
too.
Mr. Proudfoot hitting Sebastian with a belt. What happened?
That was actually several years ago, and it
To
was
Mr. Proudfoot.
And Nancy interrupted her. I didn't catch it the first time I watched it. It wasn't until I rewatched it back before I pointed this out on the live stream, the last live stream I did on this case. But this is what changed my mind about Katie, because she immediately jumped in there ready to lie and say that it was years ago. And of course, I showed you guys the Smiley Story where it wasn't. You guys, this case is, I feel so sorry for Sebastian. I do want to say thank you to my producers, Njaz, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Pepper, and Lisa Fazio. Thank you to our channel members for allowing me to cover this case and other cases that are like this. I am really heartbroken for Sebastian. I do think we will have a resolution. I do think we will have a resolution on this, because I just don't think Chris Proudfoot is as smart as he thinks he is. He didn't fool you guys. He did not fool you guys, allegedly, in my opinion. And thank you so much for your super thanks and coffee gratitude over the last 7 days. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Njaz, for your gifted channel membership. So generous. So kind. Yeah, thank you to all the mods who modded today, and our head mod, Njaz, and Brother Mike are both in here. There's Brother Mike. Let me see if I can find Njaz. Here she is. And thank you to all our mods. We have really, really nice group here. Where's Summer and Sebastian? 1-800-TBI Fine says, to me, the biggest red flag was that Sebastian didn't have a shower or bath on a school night after running around all day long. Oh, wow. Wow. Great catch. Emily said, Nancy gives them yes or no questions. Let them use their own words and let them talk. A little more talk. The story seems to change a little. Well, this is what I think happened. I think Nancy watched their other interviews, just like I did, where they were given more open-ended questions. And what she saw was that they deflected. Chris Proudfoot gave that, he thought he was like being, slick Willie, tricky me. I'm smarter than everybody else about the lie detector, where he didn't say, he said, well, I didn't say I passed it. I'm thinking, well, you did. But yeah. And I think Nancy just wanted to get them locked into a story. And you better believe, and this is my opinion. Let me know what you think, Emily, if you have a different feeling. Yeah, we didn't hear about the thud until after Nancy Grace. You're right, Emily. Tracy said this exactly, especially after saying how he smells so much he doesn't use deodorant on someone's podcast. Yeah, that was a weird thing to say about your missing child, too, right? Usually parents are saying sweet things about the kids, but she's really cold. I think he's cold too. We already knew he was awful. In my opinion, allegedly. We already knew he was not a good, kind person to Sebastian. But I think what I thought, and maybe this was just me, but I thought she was just sort of like in a hostage situation. But when I went back and when I saw her lying for him, that the CPS was several years ago, she rushes in to tell the lie. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I've been looking at the wrong Proudfoot. And I'm not saying they did anything to Sebastian, allegedly, in my opinion. But y'all know what I think. Calgal says, if they really think he ran away, why don't you ask him to please come home? We love you. Yeah, they did that in later interviews too. It's really, really sad. It's really sad. I love how Nancy said to Mr. Proudfoot, yeah. Well, that's why I think I missed when Katie jumps in there to lie for him. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh. And she's sitting next to him for all these interviews. We don't hear her. So we just assume it's him. But what I realized in watching the Duchess interviews is that she's right there. Because she chimes in here and there. She's right there next to him. So, yeah. All right, you guys. I am going to probably go have a nice glass of wine. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share. I didn't get to share this on social media at all. If you have a chat room that you think that's following this case, if you wouldn't mind popping it in there, or a Reddit room, or on Facebook, or whatever, wherever you like to socialize, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you guys on Saturday for another live stream on both the Idaho 4 case and Sebastian Rogers. Will be right after. Thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me, and I will see you on Saturday for the Sebastian Rogers live stream at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time.